Hi, and welcome to the Project Success webinar, Unpacking the Content Connectors. We are excited to share information about key components of unpacking content connectors in order to help you implement them in your classroom. Today we will discuss the purpose of unpacking, the process of unpacking, and key elements to consider. We invite you to join us again for our open office hours on December 11th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to continue our discussion on unpacking the content connectors. Project Success will host teacher experts who have experience unpacking content connectors. These teachers will share how the unpacking process impacts their daily implementation of content connectors in their classrooms, as well as techniques and resources to help you start to unpack the content connectors.
My name is Meredith Keating-Burke, and this is my third year on the Project Success team. Before that, I was a special educator for 8 years and a building level administrator, special education coordinator for 3 years.
My name is Ashley Quick, and this is my first year with Project Success. Prior to joining the Project Success team, I was a special education resource teacher for 10 years. I also have 3 years of experience in higher education custom publishing.
Today, we'll review topics related to unpacking the content connectors. We'll give you a brief overview of Project Success, and then start by discussing the role of vocabulary in unpacking content connectors. We'll move on to looking at tiered instruction and responses, and then get into the process of unpacking a content connector. Finally, we'll wrap up by discussing some next steps you can take.
We hope you leave today's webinar being able to unpack a critical content connector to identify access for all levels of learners, align embedded skills and functional application across grade levels, and identify and locate resources to guide the unpacking process.
Project Success supports teachers and administrators in Indiana by providing resources and professional development and technical assistance in designing instruction and developing curriculum that is aligned with alternate standards for students with significant cognitive disabilities. Project Success has resources that can assist teachers as they make the shift to more rigorous curriculum for students with significant cognitive disabilities. All of the content connectors can be found on the IDOE and Project Success websites. As indicated on the screen, they can be found in the resource section at projectsuccessindiana.com.
Project Success is part of the larger Indiana Resource Network, which is made possible by the Indiana Department of Education's Special Education Grants. It is comprised of centers that provide targeted, comprehensive support to schools across the state to improve teaching and learning. Many of the resources within the Indiana Resource Network are free or at low cost to districts, schools, and teachers. All of the resources and services provided by Project Success are at no cost to districts and schools.
Project Success strives to support teams of teachers and administrators in Indiana as they work to implement academic standards into instruction for students with disabilities. Much of our work is grounded in the content connectors, which are Indiana's alternate achievement standards, as well as in designing instruction that supports access to the standards for all students. Project Success provides current research-based resources related to content standards, instructional design, and student outcomes, and is specifically designed to meet the needs of students with significant disabilities. We host seasonal regional trainings with guest teachers, as well as provide targeted on-site professional development to schools and districts based on teacher and student needs. Each professional development session is targeted to specific district needs, such as locally designed assessments, unpacking content connectors, or lesson plan development. In addition, the Project Success website offers at no cost tools and resources, such as the content connectors, unpacking templates, and sample lesson plans such as Lassie's and Massey's.
So let's get into the idea of unpacking content connectors. Where do we begin?
You may be wondering what the purpose of unpacking content connectors is. What is the benefit? By unpacking content connectors, we can be intentional about providing access to all levels of learners, aligning our lessons to available curriculum resources, and strengthening our students' IEP goals.
You can find the content connectors on the Indiana DOE's website as well as the Project Success website, which is found at projectsuccessindiana.com. Here you'll find 2 reference documents. One that shows the alignment of the content connectors to the Indiana academic standards, and the other that shows the alignment of the content connectors across grade levels. These documents are useful reference tools when planning lessons and writing IEP goals.
The content connectors are prioritized according to how frequently they're assessed on iStar, as well as how important the skills are in instruction. For your first dive into unpacking content connectors, you want to focus on the critical content connectors. These are indicated by the check plus symbol on our reference documents shown on the previous slide.
Now, let's start to think about unpacking a content connector. There are 3 elements to keep in mind when beginning the unpacking process. You'll want to consider the access skills that are involved, the vocabulary that needs to be taught, and the functional application of the content connector.
First, we'll take a look at skills. There are 2 types of skills to consider when unpacking a content connector. One type is access skills, which are those skills a student needs in order to access the content connector. Examples of access skills might include communication skills or maybe specific background knowledge about a particular topic. The other type of skill to consider is embedded skills. This refers to skills that are part of the content connector itself. When you break down a content connector into the individual skills necessary to master the content connector, you are identifying the embedded skills.
Next, we'll think about identifying key vocabulary. There are 3 types of vocabulary you'll want to identify and think about as you're unpacking a content connector: core vocabulary, academic vocabulary, and assessment vocabulary.
Core vocabulary consists of about 400 words that make up 80% of what we say, write, hear, read throughout our lifetime. These words are used frequently and in a variety of situations. You'll notice that many of them are words we learned when we're first developing spoken language, because they are so powerful. It's not easy to represent core vocabulary words with pictures, so it's often difficult to teach them unless you're purposeful about it. That's why it's important to think about how you can emphasize core vocabulary when unpacking a content connector.
Fringe vocabulary, on the other hand, is sort of the opposite of core vocabulary. It's a much larger set of words that are used less often and in more specific situations. Much of fringe vocabulary is made up of nouns that are easy to label and associate with a picture, which can make those words easier to teach. However, they're less effective for overall communication. If you think about it, we only use the word umbrella when we're specifically talking about that particular item. However, core vocabulary words can be combined to convey meaning in a much broader set of circumstances.
Academic and assessment vocabulary are examples of fringe vocabulary. Academic vocabulary words are terms that are specific to particular academic subjects, and assessment vocabulary words are found on classroom and standardized assessments. Students will not be assessed effectively if they don't understand the assessment vocabulary words. So it's important to be intentional about teaching students what these words mean and how to respond to them. It is also important that all staff working with a student are consistent in their teaching and usage of academic and assessment vocabulary.
On our website, projectsuccessindiana.com, you can find reference documents that include lists of academic vocabulary terms used in the content connectors and on iStar. Here is an example of the ELA version of these documents. You can see that the term is listed to the left, with the definition in the middle and examples of how the term may be used to the right.
Here is an example of the math academic vocabulary document, using the same format with the term to the left, the definition in the middle, and examples of the terms to the right. Again, these reference documents can be found on our website under Resources. It's important to balance using student-friendly language when teaching vocabulary, with students being intentional about using the academic and assessment vocabulary terms. Of course, we want students to understand the concepts of these terms, but we also want them to recognize the specific vocabulary on the assessments.
Here is an example of assessment vocabulary terms identified by the Indiana Department of Education, along with examples of how the terms might be used.
In general, depth of knowledge refers to skills targeting a wide range of complexity that require varying levels of rigor to demonstrate. Level 1 and 2 skills are typically less rigorous than level 3 or 4 skills. However, it is important to remember that all students of all ability levels can demonstrate skills from all depth of knowledge levels, depending on access points available. For instance, one student may analyze a text comparing two different characters and using the text to support their work, where another student may analyze a text through answering yes or no questions for completing a sorting activity.
Identifying access points to the curriculum is a key component of unpacking a content connector. Access points can be found at different ability levels, and tiered instruction is one way we can target varying levels of ability. Tier 3 instruction would be at a higher level and might target a range of depths of knowledge. Materials presented would include mostly text and few visuals. Questions and directions would be more detailed. In contrast, Tier 1 instruction would be at a lower level and targeting lower or fewer depths of knowledge. There would be more visual supports included, and the language used would be more simple and direct.
This is an example of what tiered instruction might look like. All three tiers are targeting the same reading and science content connector, but the information can be presented differently to provide multiple access points for students of varying ability levels. You'll see that the Tier 3 example is all text, whereas the Tier 1 example includes as many visuals as possible. It is important to remember that all students can access the content presented in a particular tier in more than one way. For example, a Tier 3 student may have the text read aloud rather than reading it independently. In this scenario, the student may have difficulty decoding text, but is still able to process the information once heard without visuals.
This unpacking template, which can be found on our website, walks you through the unpacking process for an individual content connector.
You'll begin by listing the specific content connector. Then identify the embedded skills and concepts within the content connector. The embedded skills indicate what the student should be able to do related to the content connector, and the concepts refer to what the student should know related to the content connector.
Below that, you'll consider the skills necessary in order for students to be able to access the content connector. First, you'll list which access skills would be required of every student in order to master the grade level standard. Then, you'll consider which of those access skills are barriers for specific students so that you can be intentional about addressing them in your lesson planning.
Let's review the unpacking process together with this example. First, we have the content connector, which reads, describe characters in a story, their traits, motivations, and feelings. When looking at this content connector, we first want to consider the skills embedded within, or what the student should be able to do. Identify the character in the story, the who, describe a character in the story, describing traits, feelings, or motivations. Next, we want to review what the student should know within the content connector. A student would need to know the term who and that the term refers to a character. Understanding and being able to name feelings in order to identify the character's emotions. Understanding the WH question why in order to identify the character's motivations.
In order to describe a character, every student would need to be able to know the difference between people and objects in order to identify the character, listen and attend to text, identify details, state emotions, traits, and/or motivations, and categorize. In this example, our student demonstrates a barrier with being able to identify the character and being able to describe a feeling.
On this lesson plan template, we'll look at where you can organize the information gained from unpacking a content connector.
Under concrete understandings, you'll note the skills, what students should be able to do, and concepts, what students should be able to know, from the unpacking template. In the sections for tier considerations, you'll list the barriers for individual students at those levels, as well as methods for addressing those barriers.
In these sections of the lesson plan template, you'll note ways to provide access to your students based on the barriers that were identified previously on the unpacking template.
On our website, you can find the blank lesson plan template as well as this version that includes guiding questions for you to consider and links to the relevant resources such as the content connectors, academic vocabulary, and core vocabulary.
We encourage you to visit our website at www.projectsuccessindiana.com to explore unpacking resources, such as the unpacking template and the lesson plan template, as well as the critical content connectors to choose as you begin the unpacking process.
Thank you for joining us today to learn more about the unpacking process. We encourage you to join our open office hours on December 11th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, during which we will continue to explore the unpacking process with a panel of teacher experts. We look forward to working with you again soon.